we're going to create a hem that is a hand done hem. It's a hand stitch that creates a look on the front of our garment where we see no stitching. And then on the back of the garment, our stitches are also hid in the fold of our hem depth. So this is where we get the blind stitch name for that. So we created a nice smooth edge. We did a machine stitch to make sure that edge stays folded down. And then we hand stitched our hem depth to our garment using a blind stitch, which is actually hidden in the fold of the garment here. So we don't see any stitches on the wrong side or on the right side of our garment. To make a hem with the blind hem stitch, you're going to need your pins, you're going to need a hand needle, you're going to need your hem gauge, and skirt front pattern piece number 22 out of the pink fabric. So this is for our samples, so I am going to only use half of our skirt front. So I'm going to cut that in half along the fold. Alright, so to prepare the hem for the blind hem, we want to take our raw edge, and again we want to have a nice finished edge, so we're going to turn up the edge of our fabric 1/4 of an inch. We're going to pin that. Now with that pinned, we are ready to sew this folded edge down so that we're going to have a nice finished edge for our hem. To sew this, we're going to run a stitch just in the middle of our folded section. So we're going to back stitch. And then we're going to use a plain seam and just stitch through that. And in the middle of that folded section, when we get to the end, we're going to back stitch. To prepare our hem for our blind hem, we are going to fold up for our hem depth, and we're going to do 1.5 inches hem. So we're going to set our hem gauge to 1.5 inches, and we are going to fold up our fabric to make a hem depth of 1.5 inches. Your hem depth will depend on the garment that you're sewing. So the fuller a garment, the more flare it has, the smaller your hem depth that you're going to want, because you're going to be folding up a very full section onto a section of the fabric that has less fullness. So to get it to lay flat, you're going to want a thinner hem depth with that. Also depends on how much hem that your pattern that you actually are making allows for. So your patterns will usually tell you how much they're allowing for the depth of your hem, and that would be how much you're going to fold up to make your hem. Also, your hem depth, the most secure way to determine your hem depth is to actually try your garment on and decide where you actually want your garment to end in length, and then mark that and fold up to make your hem depth within that size of your garment finished length. Once we get that pinned, we are actually going to press that so that it's nice and flat. To do your blind hem, you're going to need a hand needle and you're going to need a single thread. So to create your single thread, you thread your thread through the needle, and at the end of your thread where your two threads are, you want that to be two different lengths. So I have one thread ending here, and then I have another thread ending here, which is feather back. And I tie a knot in the end of the longer thread, and we're going to sew that end into our fabric. As we come close and we begin to get close to the shorter end, just pull the thread through your needle and lengthen the long end that's going to be sewn into your fabric. So to make the blind stitch for our hem, we're going to go through our hem gauge depth, and we're going to take a stitch close to that folded edge just to secure our thread in place. Okay. And then we're going to take one small pick of just a single yarn out of the fabric. And pull our thread through that. And now to move over to where we're going to take our next pick, we're actually going to take our needle and go through the folded section of fabric about 1/4 of an inch. And then we're going to come out of that folded section that we folded up and stitched. And then where we came out, we're going to take a pick in the garment, one yarn, as close to the fold as we can. Then we're going to go back into the folded area. We're going to move over about 1/4 of an inch. We're going to come out of the folded area. And we're going to make another pick. We're going to continue that all the way across the fabric. And every time we go into the fold and come out, we're going to move over about 1/4 of an inch. So what we're doing is we're hiding our thread as we're moving over inside the folded area of the hem so that we don't see that. So the blind stitch, you really do not see any stitching on the right side or the wrong side of the garment, except for very small stitches where you took a pick into the fabric. So you don't see any thread running across the hem part, and we don't see any stitches on the right side of our garment either. So our thread is hidden in the fold of our hem depth. So we're going to go across the fabric, repeating that process, picking one yarn, going into the fold of the hem, moving over 1/4 of an inch, and coming back out. And I started at the left side of the garment only because I'm left-handed and it's natural to move in that direction. If you're right-handed, you can start on the right side of the garment and move in the opposite direction. We're going to go all the way across our fabric, taking a single pick of a single yarn, moving through the fold 1/4 of an inch, and coming back out. And of course I'm using contrasting thread so that you can see the stitches that I'm making. But if you were sewing this in your garment, you would be using matching thread so that the stitches would be even less evident where you've come up to make the pick. Alright, so now that we've made it across the fabric, we're ready to tie that off. I'm taking one last pick into the garment. And then I'm going to be ready to tie that off. So to tie that off, I'm going to go through the folded section. I'm going to create a loop. I'm going to bring my thread through that loop and make a knot with that. And I'm going to do that one more time. So with a loop from our thread, I'm going to put my needle through that loop so that my thread gets caught in there and tied off. Then you're done. You can cut your thread. So now if we look at the garment, we don't see any stitches, hand stitches on the wrong side of the garment. We also do not see any hand stitches on the right side of the garment either. So this is a blind hem, which is a hand stitch that is done to hide the hand stitching on both the wrong side and the right side of the garment.